When I was young, my bloodline declared, "She will be the kind who tells stories of greatness, not the one greatness is told about." I wrote no rebuttal. I simply waited. Ages later, their descendants lived in cities bearing my sigil, learned laws traced from my hand, and whispered myths of the nameless ones who doubted the girl who became the storm. When I was 9 years old, my uncle handed me a paper plate of baked beans and cornbread at a Callaway family reunion and said, loud enough for everyone to hear, "This one here's gonna write stories about greatness, not be the one anyone tells stories about." Everyone laughed. My mom didn't correct him. She just gave me a look like I should take it as a compliment. But I didn't laugh. I didn't forget either. We were sitting behind a church building in La Mesa, Texas. There were flies buzzing around the food table, the sun was melting the plastic chairs, and the air smelled like beer, baby wipes, and charcoal. That day my family made it very clear what my future looked like to them: small, quiet, and spent behind someone else's spotlight. I never said anything back. I never made a scene. But I went home and started writing in my notebook again, this time with something hotter behind every word. They told me I came from a line of helpers, as my grandma called it. My bloodline was full of folks who raised other people's kids, built churches they weren't allowed to preach in, cleaned houses they couldn't afford to live in. "We make things better for the people who get remembered," she said once. And I believed them, until I didn't. By the time I was 16, I knew I was done living the way they wanted. I worked after school at the library my mother ran. I read everything I could: old newspapers, short story collections, even court records from the 1950s. I studied the names of people who had their faces carved into buildings, and their words carved into marble. And I realized something. Every single one of those people had a moment when they just decided they were done waiting for permission. So I did the same. I saved every dollar I made for 2 years. On my 18th birthday, I told my mom I was going to stay with a friend in Abilene for a weekend. I never came back. First stop was Austin. I stayed with a girl I'd met online through a writing forum. She had a spare couch and I had a laptop with half a screen flickering. I picked up shifts at a greasy pizza shop during the day and wrote at night. Then it was San Diego. Then LA. When I thought I had a shot at screenwriting, I didn't. I landed in New York because I figured if I was going to drown, I might as well drown somewhere the world actually watched. I worked as a barista, a bookstore clerk, a temp at a law office where the partners didn't learn my name. I got robbed. I cried in stairwells. I walked 5 miles some nights just to save subway fare. And through all of it I kept writing. I wrote blog posts, short fiction, stories about girls like me who got ignored until they weren't. I posted under a pen name E.M. Callaway. I didn't want them to know it was me yet. I told myself I'd go back to Texas when my name meant something. Took 15 years. The books didn't make me rich, but they did make me known. Slowly, quietly. My second novel got picked up by a few college courses. A chapter from my third made it into a museum exhibit about modern American myth-making. Then I found out that a city council in Kansas had quoted me in a debate about public housing, a line about dignity and silence from a story I barely remembered writing. That's when I realized. The words were getting out faster than I ever could. I let it keep growing. A few years later, a girl from La Mesa messaged me on Facebook. She said she was my cousin's daughter. She was applying to a grad program and quoted something from my first book in her essay. She said her professor asked if she was related to the author. I didn't answer. Instead, I bought a plane ticket back to Texas. I showed up to La Mesa unannounced, in a rental car, wearing black and sunglasses, even though it was 90 degrees outside. I hadn't seen any of them in more than 2 decades. First stop was the library, the one my mom used to run, the one where she'd shush me for reading weird books. I walked through those doors expecting the musty carpet and slow ceiling fans. What I didn't expect was the display. There it was, a full-wall display about Eliza Marie Callaway, National Literary Voice. A plaque with my words on it. My words, right there, next to the checkout desk where they used to tell me I was wasting time. Nobody told me. Not a single one of them thought to call, write, or say, "Hey, the town finally caught on." I stared at it for a long time. Then I asked the girl at the desk where the librarian was. She told me she was new. The old librarian retired years ago. But she knew me. You're the one who wrote Hollow Fires, right? I nodded. She smiled like I was someone important, like I belonged. Downtown had changed a little. Fancier coffee shop. A new mural. But what really caught my eye was my quote painted across the side of the city hall. We rise when we are no longer afraid to be seen. I wrote that in a story about a girl burning down a church to escape a lie. It wasn't meant for politics or murals. And yet there it was. The same people who used to tell me I was dreaming too big now passed under my words to pay their water bills. I went to the diner next. The same one where my mom used to get the Friday night special. I sat at the counter. Ordered coffee. People stared. A waitress dropped her pen. Then someone took a picture. Someone else whispered my name. Then she walked in. Rhea. My aunt. The one who'd said I'd never be the one they talked about. Her hair was shorter. She had a cane now. But her eyes were still cold. She didn't sit. Just looked at me like she was still trying to figure out what I'd done wrong. You came back to show off? She asked. No, I said. I came back to see how it feels. To see what? To see a town filled with my name. To see your grandkids repeating words from the girl you all laughed at. She scoffed. You think you're better than us now? I took a sip of coffee. No. I know I am. She opened her mouth like she was going to say something cruel. But nothing came out. Just a long breath. Then she walked out. And I stayed. Not because I had anything left to prove, but because I wanted them to see what it looked like when someone they cast out became the storm they couldn't ignore. I stayed in La Mesa longer than I planned. First, I thought I'd be in and out in a weekend. Just enough time to let them see my face, see what I became, and then vanish again. But something kept me there. It wasn't nostalgia. I didn't miss this place. The streets were still cracked. The church still preached the same old hate. But I started hearing things. Whispers. At a gas station, a man in his 60s walked up to me while I filled my rental tank. You're Eliza, ain't you? Yeah. You're the one they tried to forget. He walked away without saying another word. A few days later, I got a letter slipped under my hotel door. No return address. No name. Just one line. They tried to bury you. They didn't know you were seed. That was a line I wrote in a blog post 10 years ago. I barely remembered it. But somebody here did. Then one morning, I drove past the new Civic Center. Big concrete building. Glass entrance. Fancy. On the side next to the flagpoles was a metal sculpture. Modern looking. But I knew what it was. It was my sigil. I never called it that out loud. But it was a symbol I used in every book, a mix of a storm cloud, a flame, and a broken crown. I'd sketched it on notebook covers since I was a teenager. And now it was here. Embedded in metal, on the building where the mayor worked. I parked. Walked in. Asked the woman at the front who commissioned the piece. She didn't know. Said the records were public though, and I could ask the city clerk. I did. That's when it got messy. The city clerk was a soft-spoken man named Brian. Wore a BOLO tie and smelled like peppermint. He pulled up the record without fuss. The sculpture had been installed 2 years ago. Paid for by a Callaway Legacy Fund. I stared at the screen. What's that? I asked. It's a family trust, he said. Big donation. Set up about 5 years back. They've paid for a bunch of civic stuff, the library wing, the mural, even scholarships. I leaned in. Who started the fund? He hesitated. Says it was started by Anna Lou Callaway. My mother. I felt like the floor shifted under me. I left the building in a haze. My mother. The same woman who stood by while they told me I wasn't meant for anything big. The woman who let my notebooks get thrown out when I left. She started a legacy fund in my name? I drove straight to her house. Same place I grew up in, one story, beige siding, wind chimes on the porch. I sat in the car for 10 minutes before I got out. She opened the door before I even knocked. Like she'd been waiting. You found it, she said. We sat in her living room. Nothing had changed. Same Afghan over the couch. Same fake flowers. Same smell of lemon cleaner. I thought you didn't believe in any of it, I said. I didn't, she said quietly. But I was wrong. That knocked the wind out of me. I read your first book, she continued. Didn't tell anyone. I bought it under a fake name in case you ever found out. I didn't want to make it harder for you. Why? Because I didn't deserve to be part of it. I didn't know what to say. She told me about the fund. How after my second book got national attention, she started putting money aside. Small at first, then more. She used her retirement, sold off land, took what she could and gave it back to the town, but only in my name. I wanted your name to live here longer than mine ever did, she said. But there was more. That same day, a local teacher reached out to me, said she was running an after-school writing program, and the kids wanted to meet me. I agreed, half out of guilt, half out of curiosity. I walked into that school and saw 20 kids sitting in folding chairs, holding my books. And behind them on the wall, another quote, "Let them doubt you. That's how you know you're ahead." That wasn't even from a novel. It was from a Twitter post I made in 2014. Somebody in that town had been collecting everything I ever wrote, and the kids knew it. They weren't just reading my stories. They were living them. That's when I realized someone here had been keeping my legacy alive in secret, and it wasn't just my mom. After that visit to the school, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about the quotes, the plaques, the murals, the fund. It was like my whole past had been rewritten behind my back, and somehow I was both the ghost and the god of this little town. I started asking questions. First, people were cautious. Then one night, at the local bar, a place called Rick's Taproom, a woman sat down across from me. Middle-aged. Clean jeans, a Waco State t-shirt, silver hair pulled tight. She introduced herself. Carla Bennett. I didn't know her, but she knew me. She used to be the school secretary. Said she followed my blog for years. Started printing out posts and leaving them in the teacher's lounge. She didn't tell anyone where they came from. Just let them show up like found treasure. They read them, she said. Even the ones who hated your name. I asked her why she did it. Because I saw what they did to you, she said. How they all told you to shrink. I saw the light go out in you, and I watched this town pretend they didn't snuff it out. She told me she was the one who pushed to get your quotes used in town projects. She pulled strings, asked for donations, used my name even when she wasn't supposed to. Your books gave me a reason to stay here, she said. So I gave them a reason to remember you. The next day I met with the mayor. I wanted to know how much of the town's transformation had been linked to my name, and who had pushed it. He didn't dodge the question. We knew it would bring attention, he said. Calloway's a known name now. Every time a journalist mentions you're from Lamesa, we see a bump in interest. We leaned into it. So this town's a monument to me because it's profitable? In part, yes. He didn't apologize. I left the office feeling hollow. Then I got a call from a blocked number. The voice on the other end was low, male, older. You think they love you now? They don't. You're just the product they're selling. They'll erase you again the second it stops working. Who is this? He hung up. I didn't sleep that night either. A week later, I found out someone had broken into my old bedroom window. The house was fine. Nothing was taken. But on the desk, someone had left a burned notebook. One of mine. From when I was a kid. Half the pages were scorched. The rest were covered in red pen crossed out lines, circled words, notes like, not real, too big. Don't forget who you are. I knew that handwriting. It was my grandfather's. He'd been dead for over 10 years. I went to the garage out back, the one where he used to sit in his recliner. Radio turned up too loud. It was locked. My mother said she hadn't opened it since he died. Inside we found boxes. Dozens of them. Full of my writing. Old stories. Poems. Even drawings I'd made and thought had been thrown away. He hadn't burned them. He'd kept them. Marked them. Judged them. Stored them. He'd been watching my entire life. Even after I left. And somehow, someone else now had access to those same boxes. Something wasn't right. Someone in this town didn't want me back. And they were getting bold. First the warning call. Then the burned notebook. Then the mayor's passive profit talk. All this time, I thought the town had changed. But now I wasn't sure if it had really changed, or just figured out how to use me better. And if I was the storm, then something old was still hiding under the rubble, waiting to strike back. I didn't leave town. I wanted to, but I couldn't. Someone was trying to rewrite my story. Again. And I wasn't going to let it happen. I stayed quiet for a few more days. I kept up the appearances visiting schools, signing books, waving when someone recognized me at the market. But I started digging in private. I got into the town records. With Carla's help, I looked through donations, names, city contracts. What I found made my chest go cold. That Callaway Legacy Fund, the one my mother supposedly started? It had other names attached. 4 of them. Rhea Callaway, Mayor Don Atlee, Principal Stuart Rhodes, and my mother. It had been a group decision. They'd used my name to make themselves look good. Even the scholarship fund, the one that bore my quote. Rhea was the one who approved which kids got it. And guess what? None of the kids who looked or sounded like me ever made the list. I confronted my mother first. Why didn't you tell me you let Rhea in on it? She didn't cry. She didn't even argue. She threatened to cut the fund off, she said. Said if I didn't let her have control, she'd turn the town against you all over again. You let her own me. I was trying to protect your name. I shook my head. No. You were trying to wash away the guilt of watching them break me. She didn't have an answer for that. Next was the mayor. I didn't ask for a meeting. I showed up during a town council session, stood in the back until they opened the floor for public comments. When it was my turn, I didn't hold back. I've heard my name used here more in the last 2 weeks than I did in the entire 18 years I lived in this town. And now I know why. Because you've been selling it like a brand. People shifted in their chairs. I was never your hero. I was your scapegoat. And now that I made it, now that I'm safe to use, you build monuments. But you don't care what it cost me. Someone tried to cut me off. The mayor banged his gavel. I looked right at him. You used my family, my pain, my story. So here's what's going to happen next. I'm taking the name back. I filed a cease and desist against the city for unauthorized use of my name, quotes, and literary property. They tried to claim it was public domain. They were wrong. Then I went further. I wrote an op-ed, not a polite one. I named names, told the whole truth, how the town turned on a girl who dared to want more, how they punished ambition and repackaged it as pride once it made them money. It ran in the New Yorker. Then the Washington Post picked it up. By the end of the week, the mayor had stepped down. Rhea made a Facebook post calling me ungrateful. It got ratioed so hard she deleted her account. The scholarships, I took them back. Started my own with new rules. Open only to kids like I was. Invisible, angry, unpolished. No legacy ties. No family vote. Just potential. I moved the fund out of La Mesa. Set up in Amarillo. I hired Carla as the director. And I went back to my apartment in New York. Shut the door behind me. 3 months later, I got a letter in the mail. No return address. Inside was a photo, one I hadn't seen in years. Me sitting on that cracked porch, age 12, notebook in hand. Taken from behind like someone had watched me without me knowing. On the back was a note. Storms never stay still. But they do leave marks. You left yours. Yeah, I knew who it was from. My grandfather. He'd seen me. He judged me. But maybe in the end he knew he couldn't stop what I was becoming. I didn't come back to La Mesa again. Not in person. But my stories did. And now they weren't twisted by old bloodlines, or used to sell council seats. They were taught in classrooms I'd never step into, quoted in places that had once shut me out. And the people who tried to bury me? They became the forgotten ones. Even the ones I loved, my mother, Carla, they got their parts in the story. But none of them got to write the ending. That was mine. Because they were right about one thing all those years ago. I was the kind who told stories. They just never guessed I'd write the one that buried their legacy and made my own. I didn't need revenge through fire or fists. I got it through truth. I became the storm. And they had no shelter.